How worried is your government, though, about the possibility of all this money being unfrozen, all these Iranian assets being unfrozen around the world and being spent in whatever direction Iran chooses now in future?
Every country in the world is worried about this, because Iran's record, unfortunately, is not a perfect record when it comes to being a nation state that acts in a reasonable manner. Iran's record has been one of war and destruction, terrorism, assassination, destabilization, interference in the affairs of other countries. And the concern that most countries in the world have is that Iran not use these funds in order to fund these destabilizing activities, and instead use those funds in order to improve the standard of living of its people.
You've talked about Iran not behaving like a nation state, and you've warned of countermeasures that your government could take if that continues. What kind of countermeasures are we talking about?
We've cut off diplomatic relations with Iran, we cut off commercial relations with Iran, we cut off air travel to and from Iran, and we have a travel warning and prohibition of travel to Iran by our citizens. We are supporting our allies and our friends who are suffering from aggression by Iran and from interference by Iran in their internal affairs, and we will assess things as they move along, but we will not stand idly by while the Iranians try to spread their influence and their mischief in the region.
People in the West are used to seeing Saudi Arabia as a conservative, rather inscrutable nation, but one that has been seen and presented by Western governments as a sort of bastion of stability. In recent days and weeks, we've seen headlines talking about Saudi Arabia's leadership as being reckless, impulsive, aggressive. These aren't the adjectives we normally hear.
Only too recently ago, people were criticizing Saudi Arabia, including in your media in Britain, for not taking a leadership role. Saudi Arabia needs to step up and take a leadership role. The West cannot be the policeman of the Gulf. The West cannot protect the Saudis. The Saudis have all this money and they're sitting on it and they want to hold our coattails while we go to battle with them. These were the words we were hearing from everyone, including from people in the British press. Now that Saudi Arabia stepped up and taken decisive action in Yemen, in supporting the Syrian opposition, in standing up to Iran, people are saying, why are the Saudis doing this? It's reckless. It's one of those positions where it's damn if we do, damn if we don't. Make up your mind. Do you want us to lead or do you want us to support? And if you want us to support, who's going to lead? The judicial system in Saudi Arabia is independent, and it is fair, and it is transparent. And the decisions about proceeding or not proceeding are internal Saudi matters. We have tremendous respect for the judicial system of other countries, and we expect other countries to respect our judiciary.
Because the British government has been lobbying you, hasn't it, not to do it?
Irrespective of what people think, this is the Saudi judicial system. We do not interfere in Britain's judicial system, with all due respect, or anyone else's judicial system. And so we will do whatever we need to do in line with our judicial system. Now, the case you talked about is still under review, and we will have to see what the final decisions are.
You must realise you do have a terrible image problem at the moment. Are you going to do something about that? I mean, you don't have to execute as many people as you do.
Well, on this issue we have a fundamental difference. In your country you do not execute people, we respect it. In our country the death penalty is a part of our laws, and you have to respect this, as it is the law, part of the law in the United States and other countries. With regards to the perception of Saudi Arabia among the British public, this is a problem that we need to work on. We have not been good at explaining ourselves. We have not done a good job at reaching out to the British media or to the British public. We have not, or to the British institutions, academic institutions, think tanks, and so forth. We maybe not have been as communicative as we should be.
What about the facts of your campaign in Yemen? Your government has said it would carry out an investigation into alleged breaches of international humanitarian law, specifically the killing of civilians. Have you carried out that investigation, and can you tell us what you've concluded?
We are looking at all of these issues carefully, and we're looking at the record. I want to say something, and I don't want this to sound defensive, but a lot of the charges that are leveled against Saudi Arabia by NGOs or by third-party observers or based on Twitter reports tend to be baseless. The Iranian government itself alleged that we bombed their embassy in Sana'a, and it turns out to be false.
But are you saying you haven't killed civilians from the air?
Look, the Houthis have been bombing a lot of people from the ground indiscriminately. The Houthis have been using child soldiers, and I don't hear you complaining about this or any of your colleagues. We have no interest in trying to harm civilians, and if there's any collateral damage that happens, we will deal with it. But the idea, the notion that we are bombing civilians indiscriminately is A, not borne by the facts, and B, not fair.
Finally, is the British government warning you that it may stop supplying weapons? Is it sufficiently worried that that might actually happen because of these reports of civilian casualties?
If a mistake is made, if an incident happened, we investigate it. If it turns out that it was a mistake, we will acknowledge it, and we will find ways to reduce it.
With that explanation,
everybody is satisfied with that explanation, because in all wars you have collateral damage. We hope they will. The Syrian opposition was gathered together in Riyadh in an unprecedented move. All of the factions were represented. They agreed on a platform, on a vision for Syria. They agreed on what the new Syria should look like and the process for getting there. And they picked their negotiating team. And so now they're ready. It is the regime of Bashar al-Assad that has been dragging its feet and
says it's ready.
Well, we will see. It has said many things before that it didn't comply with. We hope that the talks will begin on the 25th, so we can launch the process that will lead to the establishment of an interim governing council that will assume power from the Bashar regime, and that will then move towards writing a new constitution and having elections. And we hope that and expect that during the interim period of this transition period, Bashar al-Assad will exit because he has absolutely no role to play in the future Syria.
If the talks go ahead on the 25th, you will have to sit at the same table as Iran. Are you going to be able to work together now that you don't have diplomatic relations and the strains are at an unprecedented low?
Well, I think that the talks will be between Syrians and Syrians. We will not be at the table, nor will Iran.
But they'll open with you.
We are committed to the process, the transition process in Syria. We are committed to what is called now the Vienna process, the Geneva principles and the principles enshrined in the UN Security Council resolutions, in spite of our differences with Iran.
You've had talks with the US Secretary of State John Kerry. He's possibly leaving London to go to an announcement that sanctions will be lifted against Iran. Did you have concerns that you expressed to him?
We have concerns about Iran's behavior in general. Iran is a country that has to decide whether it is a revolution or a nation state. If it is a revolution, it is irrational and emotional and impulsive and expansionary and irrational, difficult to deal with. If it is a nation states tend to be reasonable, rational actors, and they know their limits, and they work on the basis of what is mutually beneficial. And so with Iran, we're not sure. We don't know if it's a revolution or a nation state. We hope it will see itself as a nation state and act as such. But what we have seen, unfortunately, in the last 35 years is a country that has used murder, a country that has used terrorism, a country that has used sectarianism, a country that has interfered in the affairs of others in the region in a very destructive and destabilizing manner. That is what concerns us.
But they have equally, sir, they have concerns about you and your behavior in the region, your decision to suddenly cut off ties, the execution of Nimr al-Nimr.
What business does Iran have in it? Iran puts to death more than 1,000 people a year. That's their business. We don't know why they were put to death. In our case, this was transparent. Iran is arguing that this man was a man of religion and a peaceful protester. He was a terrorist. He was as much a man of religion as Osama bin Laden was. He was recruiting, he was inciting, he was equipping, he was plotting, and he was executing terrorist attacks that led to the death of a number of security officials in Saudi Arabia, and that's why he was sentenced to death. And so, with all due respect to Iran, they have no business interfering in our judiciary, one. And two, the last thing they can say is that Saudi Arabia engaged in any kind of aggression towards them. We have been on the receiving end of Iran's aggression for decades now.